Whenever you ask a researcher to what you've been thinking of, we're always thinking of our last and what research we're doing right now or what work we're working on right now. So therefore, I'm presenting to you what I'm working on right now. I just got back from California, so this is a California slide. So one of the areas that I work on is using predictive analytics or taking data and seeing if we can get some help to frontline workers, especially in child maltreatment, to help them make better decisions. So this is work, we're doing some prototype work in California, and what we've done is we've taken 1.7 million calls that came into what's called a child protection hotline. So in the US, there's about 3 million calls a year to these child protection hotlines. And these are calls of concern that say that we're concerned about a child is being abused or maltreated. And a bunch of these calls actually don't end up going anywhere because there's no content to them. And some of these calls are really urgent and need action straight away. And what the call taker is having to make a decision on that call and subsequently in the next couple of days is, should we drive out and see this child? What decision should we make? And because there are so many calls, you can't drive out and investigate every single call, and it would be quite burdensome on the family if every time a neighbor who's annoyed with you called, or your partner's having dispute called, you got a visit from a child protection worker. That would be quite burdensome. But on the other hand, you can't leave things uninvestigated if they need to be investigated. So at the moment, the decisions are being made simply on the call and looking at some data systems that are really old, 15, 20-year-old data systems. And these social workers are trying to make the best decision they can about whether to take subsequent action or not. So what we've done is we've taken the data system and we've actually structured the history of all the people who've been mentioned in the call. For example, has the adults, the mother, the partner, the alleged victim, the alleged perpetrator, have any of them had any history of having been reported before, of having any findings, of having any system involvement at all? And then using all that structured data, we've done the following exercise. We've taken every of one of those 1.7 million calls and put them into, say, 10 buckets, where the highest risk is the most likely for something serious to happen to that child in 2 years. So we're looking for long arc risk. We're saying it might be fine now, but within 2 years, what will happen to this child? And 1 means very minimal risk of something happening to the child. And what we find is 1 in every 10 of the current children. So then we went back and we said, what's happening to these children at the moment? So we went back and we looked at the children who the algorithm would have said were at very high risk. And what we found is that 60% of all the fatalities, child maltreatment related fatalities where children had been killed with maltreatment, fell in the top 2 buckets. Less than 1% fell in the bottom 2 buckets. We also found that of the children in the top bucket, 67% of them went on in the next 2 years to have a case open or to be removed from home. And the rate was less than, I think it was around 1% in the bottom bucket. A bit jet lagged, so I can't remember the exact number in the bottom bucket. But it was a huge difference. And then what we found most concerningly is that of the children in the top bucket, 1 in 10 of them were actually not having anything done. Nobody was going out and doing anything. And yet, if you went 2 years later, half those missed children went on to have a maltreatment case open, which means there was some concerns. And 1 in 3 of those missed children are placed in foster care when you come back 2 years later. And just as concerning is that 70% of the children in the bottom buckets were being screened in. Someone was driving out and visiting these children, subjecting them to the burden of investigation and the families to that distressing situation with really very little indication. And when we followed those children, really less than hardly anything happened to them, even if they've investigated, even if a case was open, nothing happened to them. So to me, this is an example of how data can be used. And so since I was asked to speak for 5 minutes on what I've been thinking about, that's what I've been thinking about.